It's official. Bill C-45 has passed through both the House of Commons and the Senate and will soon become law. This will make the recreational use of marijuana legal across Canada. There have been a spectrum of criticisms given to the bill, ranging from traditional conservatives claiming that the bill will bring nothing but trouble, to the NDP saying that the bill doesn't go far enough and has discussed a platform pushing for the legalization of all drugs. But on the surface level, perhaps the most surprising critique has been from the Libertarian Party of Canada. Libertarians have always been pro-cannabis and pro-drug legalization in general, but many party members claim that the current legalization is not all that it's cracked up to be, and in fact, Bill C-45 and the accompanying piece of legislation, Bill C-46, give the government more power than previous and will negatively affect Canadians' liberty. There are three methods that the RCMP can use to determine if someone is driving stoned. Unfortunately, the further we go, the more draconian and unreliable these methods become. The first and least offensive way is called a DRE, or Drug Recognition Evaluation. This is a variety of standardized physical checks that were developed to test if someone is under the influence of alcohol. This includes tests such as touching the tip of one's finger to the tip of their nose and walking 9 steps in a straight line heel to toe. As straightforward as this may sound, there are problems with these checks. The first problem is that these are literally designed to trick the person engaging in them to fail. This is done by giving vague instructions paired with hyper-alertness for slip-ups. The second is that these tests aren't even relevant to functional driving skills. Plenty of people may be simply unbalanced or unable to properly complete the tasks due to a physical impediment but can still drive fine. The third is that there is little evidence supporting that these tests are more difficult for people who are under the influence of marijuana. In some cases, they may even perform better. The current roadside testing mechanism the Canadian government has committed to is the Drogger 5000. The machine requires suspected drivers to hold a cylindrical cotton swab between their gum and cheek for a minimum of 1 minute and a maximum of 4 minutes, without biting or sucking the cotton swab, of course. The swab is then placed in the machine and will give results of drugs detected in the saliva within or up to 15 minutes. Again, this is not without its flaws, specifically that the machine must be used on a flat surface and must have a specific temperature range. Neither the dashboard of a police cruiser nor the ground will be flat enough to have a reliable reading. The temperature range in which the Drogger is effective is 4 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. Automatically, this implies that there will be a reputable threat of mechanical failure due to temperature in most of Canada during non-summer months. Thankfully, there is another way for the RCMP to scientifically prove you're driving stoned. Canada has now made it legal for police officers to draw blood from people being suspected of driving while impaired by drug use. This means that if officers believe they need further conclusive evidence past the saliva sample, they will be able to draw blood from a driver. There are multiple concerns that come with this. The most alarming is the lack of defined location in which the RCMP are allowed to draw blood. Because of the vagueness of this bill, this will allow the police to take blood samples either on the side of the road or in the back of a cruiser, both of which are incredibly unsanitary conditions where the suspected person will in all likelihood be unwilling to cooperate. It will be illegal to refuse the blood sample under Bill C-46 and will result in a mandatory roadside suspension if the suspect does so. If you have any apprehension about a police officer who is inadequately trained in drawing blood, taking your blood on the side of a road, well, you're as good as guilty. Unfortunately, it's inevitable that an involved party, either the constable or citizen, will at some point be injured. In addition to the inherent safety risks associated with roadside blood tests, there has been scientific evidence that suggests the competency of blood testing for impairment is significantly flawed. This is because of how the body absorbs and stores THC, the psychoactive chemical in marijuana. THC is stored in the fat cells and in the case of chronic use can be retained for up to 2 months. If a regular marijuana user goes on a diet that causes fat cells to break down, detectable levels of THC will be found in the bloodstream. This will be the case even if the suspected party has not smoked for 2 months. They will be legally unable to drive due to the levels of THC in their body, regardless of whether or not they're functionally impaired. This raises a serious concern for people who use marijuana for medicinal purposes. If you take your medicine, you will legally be unable to drive. Unfortunately, people who use CBDs, a popular multi-purpose drug which doesn't have any impairing effects, will still trigger a positive result on these tests. The set ratio for THC to blood is 2 nanograms of THC per deciliter of blood. However, this does not take into consideration the wide variances of tolerances associated with marijuana use and effectively makes the measurement of functional impairment irrelevant. Thus, a reasonable conclusion can be summarized as, if you are a regular marijuana user, medicinal or not, you will be legally unable to drive, regardless of whether or not you were stoned at the time of operating a vehicle. Outside of Bill C-46, the government has also introduced new regulations and laws regarding possession. There is a set amount of dried cannabis flower people are allowed to have on their person at one time, seemingly set arbitrarily at 30 grams. If one exceeds that limit, they are considered to be a criminal. This 30-gram stipulation only affects Canadians in what is considered to be a public space, but what falls under public space may surprise you. For instance, if you have over that limit in your vehicle, you will be a criminal under the new law. Even if the marijuana is in a sealed, locked, and hidden container under the seats. There are plenty of reasons one may be transferring this much pot without malevolent intent. Imagine if there was a cap of 100 beers one could possess at one time. Now imagine they have 105 beers on them in preparation for a long weekend camping trip. They're pulled over and given jail time for something which in reality is completely innocuous. This is the type of parallel we are setting up as of right now. The legal framework currently in place has a maximum 14-year penalty on the following cannabis-related offenses, plus more I'm skipping for the sake of brevity. Unauthorized distribution of any quantity of cannabis to a person under the age of 18. Unauthorized selling of any quantity to anyone under or over the age of 18. And unauthorized distribution of over 30 grams of dried cannabis to an adult. The rule regarding distribution to people under the age of 18 may seem self-evident, but let's contextualize this a little bit. If a parent wanted to give their kid a joint in their own home to make sure their child has a safe environment to experiment with marijuana, they're a criminal who could potentially face up to 14 years in prison. There is no way we would have a similar legislation if a parent poured their 16-year-old son or daughter a glass of wine with dinner. Similar restrictive provisions have been given to what is labeled as illicit cannabis. Cannabis that is or was sold, produced, or distributed by a person prohibited from doing so under this act, which in the common vernacular means any pot that was not purchased from a small number of companies awarded with a government contract, and marijuana one grows themselves. As long as the homegrown falls within the specifications put forward in this bill, of course. So that means if you and your friend are both cannabis connoisseurs and your friend grows a new strain that they think you may like, they will be a criminal if they sell you some. Bill C-45 has created an oligarchical distribution chain for cannabis and has severely limited what people can actually do with marijuana. So long are the days of cannabis entrepreneurism and innovation, which we saw flourish in the gray market we had in places like Vancouver for the past decade. We were promised cannabis legalization, and unfortunately what we were given was a distortion of what we were hoping for. If Bill C-45 is a step in the right direction toward people having bodily autonomy and choosing what substances they put in their own body with little to no effect on other people, then Bill C-46 is 3 steps back for personal privacy and the guarantee of safety from overzealous law enforcement members.